Good afternoon, everybody. That's me, Kirsten van den Hul. It's nice to see my name so big behind my back. I also call myself the change agent. That's also the name under which I tweet and blog and write. And I am a big believer in peace. I think we all share that today. Welcome very much to the peace-inspired Hague Talks that we have here today. It's great to have you all with us. The topic of today's session is young justice, kids in conflict. Why now? Well, as I'm sure a lot of you know, this year we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And even though we did make progress in those 25 years, there's still a lot to be done. I don't need to tell you that there is a shocking amount of conflict going on as we speak. And there is an even more shocking amount of children that is either internally displaced, is being threatened, is in need of food, medical care, or just in need of a hug, or school, or a safe place to play. A lot remains to be done. So what we would like to do today is to explore new solutions, and maybe we, as we sit here together, can set peace and justice in motion to bring that future just a little bit closer, not just for us, but for everyone who needs it around the world. This is not a conference where you just sit back and listen to a bunch of very interesting speakers. No, the reason that you are all here is because you are about to ask questions. That is why you've been selected and invited to be here. So we count on you to join the debate. And just to give you an idea of some of the great motivations that were actually sent in to accompany your registration, I want to read two of them to you now. One was by Wouter Jan Leijs. Are you here, Wouter Jan? Maybe he's like, oh, I'm not Wouter Jan, not me. But I'm going to read it to you anyway. It's a poem. Let's talk about peace. The blessing no one sees, yet liberates us from disease of oppression, war, and too much police. So please, I beg you on my knees, lure me to the land of cheese, to take part in your masterpiece, and why not release me from paying fees? Now, how can you refuse that? Yeah, of course you cannot say no. And then there was a beautiful letter by Camelia Khalil. Are you here, Camelia? Yes, hi Camelia, welcome. Good to have you with us. Camelia wrote about her experience as a half Bulgarian, half Syrian student of international studies here in Leiden. Why she's motivated to join. The topic of identity was one of the topics, but also the experience Camelia had working with an NGO teaching Afghan, Iraqi and Syrian refugees. And that inspired her to want to increase her knowledge about refugees and conflict. So welcome, good to have you here, Camelia. Yes, so the idea today is that please join the discussion. Another way to join the discussion today is by joining us through live stream, because this event is actually being recorded. You see the cameras there. I would like to also extend a warm welcome to the people who are joining us from their computers all over the world. Welcome, good to have you here. Ahlan wa sahlan, bienvenue, bienvenidos, bienvenue, marhaba. Good to have you here. And all the time, whenever you hear something or think of something that you want to share, please throw it out. Throw it online. There is a website, haguetalks.com. There is a Facebook page, and of course there's Twitter. We have a hashtag, Hague Talks. So, and we even have a Twitter account. And there's a social media team in the back. Let's wave. Yes, that's the social media team. And they'll be feeding me with all the questions that have been tweeted or Facebooked or sent to us through those means. But before we start with the program, let's listen to a special message from one of the most respected and admired freedom fighters in the world. All the way from South Africa, please have a look.
Welcome to Hague Talks, which are going to concentrate especially on the rights of children, right to education, right to good health, right to a happy home, right to education. I hope, that you who will be participating in this conference will make your voice heard. War is not nice to children, so we ought not to have war. And therefore, we ought not to be spending as much as we do on armaments, so-called defense budgets. Every child deserves to have a good home, the safety of a good and decent home. I hope you would want to say, we want to build a world where children will be safe, where children will have a decent home, where children will not go to bed hungry, where children can play without fear of being attacked, where children can go to school, where children can have access to good health care. So go for it.
This was, of course, Desmond Tutu, one of my personal heroes, and even though he's not with us today, let's give him a round of applause. Maybe he's joining us on live stream, who knows? Thank you. And for the people who've joined us later, can I please ask everyone to move a little bit up front? So everybody who sees an empty chair in front of them, please have a seat on that empty chair. So we snuggle up. Yes, very good. And welcome to the people who've joined us later. It's time for me to introduce our first guest. Now, a lot of people, when they hear the word hip-hop, they think maybe about music videos, bling-bling, fast cars, maybe about violent lyrics or about sex. But our next speaker uses hip-hop in a very different way. He's a guy from Bosnia who likes to use his music, his lyrics, to get people to think. And it's an honor and a pleasure to introduce to you, all the way from Bosnia, Frankie. Give him a warm welcome.
Imao sam 10 godina kada je to sve počelo, ja sam iz Bijeljne. Mi sjećam se da smo preko noći da je stari barikadirao vrata, jer su preko noći bukvalno nestajale familije.
Odi ovam! Odi ovam!
Ko je pucao sad malo?
Ne znam gdje si mi.
Ko je pucao?
Pa ne znam pokoj.
Najveći pakao i najveća zla su se dešavala nakon što su Arkanovci zauzeli taj grad. Tako da je dosta ljudi nakon toga ubijeno, protjerano. Imao sam 2 člana familije koji su bili u koncentracionim logorima u Batkovićima. Sjećam se kada je Arkan sletio u moje školsko dvorište s helikopterom i postrojio svoje vojnike.
Slava im! Slava im! Ustaše jedno pobiti! Nećemo ih pobiti!
Zato ti Milane pišem ovo pismo, da vidiš di smo i da svi isti nismo. Moji će mi zamjert, al tako ja biram. Namjera je iskrena i zato sam miran na njihov...
Milan je moj dobar prijatelj i mirovni aktivista. I ja sam, družeći se s njim, učestvovao u par njihovih radionica gdje su oni radili sa vojnim veteranima i sa omladinom.
Mi smo dosta razgovarali o tome šta će biti kad takva pjesma izađe. ko su oni koji će biti protiv.
Teško je drugima izraziti sućut, tvoji će te šutnut, a oni pljunut. Zloupotrijebit u novi sukob gurnut i tako će vatre opet buknut.
Htio sam ja, a i on zajedno smo nekako zajedno gradili taj tekst, da pokažem da razumijem strahove drugih ljudi, zato što ja slične te strahove nosim u sebi. Dijalog jako potreban svima nama. Mislim da to ne može biti nam uvezeno sa zapada i ne može nam donijeti visoki predstavnik i čak mislim da ne mogu to političari, ja mislim da kod nas ne postoje dovoljno iskreni i dobri političari koji mogu tu priču da započnu. Mislim da to stvarno treba početi od običnih ljudi, od građana. Samo tako može doći do tog nekog pomirenja.
Ako nije dobro u Bosni, onda neće biti dobro ni u Srbiji, niti u Hrvatskoj. Kad danas u Bosni ljudi kažu više nije rat, onda ako ih pitamo kao, a je li mir? Pa jeste, čim nije rat, onda je mir. Ako malo onda dublje uđete u razgovor i pitate šta u stvari mir znači. Mir znači da se osjećam sigurno, da se osjećam dobro, da mogu da se krećem slobodno, da imam sve potrebe zadovoljene, onda kažu ljudi da, mi ne živimo u miru. I šta je onda ovo, ako nije mir i ako nije rat? Pitanje sigurnosti je ono što je problem. Ako ja putujem kroz Bosnu, onog trenutka kad uđem u neko selo ili mesto, ja po boji znakova koji označavaju ulice ili po zastavama koje vise znam da li sam tu dobrodošao ili nisam. Dakle, ne osjećam se sigurno. Još uvek imam mesta u kojima možda nije baš pametno da uveče u kafiću kažem kako se zovem, onda dakle ne govorimo o sigurnom prostoru, o sigurnosti koja nam je potrebna da bi se osjećali bolje.
Baš ti mladi, koji se ne sjećaju nekih ratnih zbivanja, koji ne sjećaju se, ne znam, eksplozije granate i svega toga, koji su se rodili posle rata, da su čak i veći nacionalisti od ljudi koji su možda učestvovali u ratu.
Znam, teško je kad te optužuju stalno i kad čuješ od mojih onu genocidan narod. Nisi takav i kontam nije lako, znaj i ti, ja ne mislim tako.
Pročitao sam komentar momka iz Trebinja koji poziva Frenkija i kaže dođi u Trebinje, a ne znam tačno kako je rekao, ali slično onom neće ti dlaka s glave faliti, napravit ćemo ti koncert i bravo za ovo. Ja mislim da ova pesma u tom smislu ohrabruje malo ljude, kao ako je sad Frenki imao hrabrosti da to izgovori, pa ajmo i mi malo da budemo hrabri da izgovorimo.
Teško je drugima izraziti sućut, tvoji će te šutnut, a oni pljunut. Možemo drugima izraziti sućut ili još 20 godina ovako ukrut.
Some Bosnian hip hop for you today. 1, 2. Check. Okay. Ra, da, da. Oni hoće samo ra, da, da. Oni traže samo ra, da, da. Oni hoće samo ra, da. Opet idemo za našeg vođu ginemo, nisi pod našim imenom i za tebe ne brinemo. Prati me sine moj i kud predak ide tvoj, spreman za rat i boj, dat život krvi znoj. Nauči sina da se ne druži sa njima jer sukob sa drugima naša je care sudbina. Dio ludila vidiš drugačijeg udriga, ubiga da se ne miješa njegova moja skupina. Ko mržnja preko komaraca, mržnja se širi do malaca, oni se kolju više od staraca. Kolju se kora su pušeni slanaca i to nije tako care samo kod bosanaca. Tako je kod mene kod sebe u svakom gradu, sjemena koja su zasijana sad rastu. Zato Balkan su odžavanje pokret, ili će za par godina biti opet ra, da, da. Oni hoće samo ra, da, da. Oni žele samo ra, da, da. Oni hoće samo ra, da, da. Thank you. I hope you understand that song. I hope your Bosnian is good. Well, it's a funny language, I know. Well, this song that I performed right now is for young people in Bosnia and the Balkans. And because young people, my experience is that young people listen to hip-hop more than their parents and their teachers. Parents get always scared when I tell them this, but it's the truth. I'm sorry. As you can see in the movie, I'm from Bosnia. I had the chance to witness civil war firsthand. Matter of fact, I moved to Germany in the 90s. I used to live in Germany for 6 years, went to school there, had my first girlfriend there, my first beer, my second beer, all the fun stuff. But later on, I realized that some changes are going on in my class. I saw that some of my friends started to change a little bit. They started to shave their heads, started to wear some black boots, and that was the time where this neo-Nazi movement was getting popular in smaller town like mine. And I can tell you, it was not funny for me. Later on in the 9th grade, we had a school trip to the concentration camp Dachau in Bavaria. So we went on the bus with our teachers, and we went to visit this big complex. And as you can imagine, it was a quite intense and emotional moment when we entered this big complex, especially for my Nazi friends, because we saw these pictures of, dead people, old clothes, old shoes, and stuff like that. We, of course, talked about that visit for a long time after it. And I could see again that some changes is going on in my class. My Nazi friends started to grow their hair again, sneakers replaced their boots, and I could see the shame in their eyes and their faces because they realized what they were representing. This moment, this visit, this trip to Dachau stuck for me for a long time. I even remember it often in Bosnia when I see these young kids in Bosnia. They remind me a lot of my Nazi friends back in school in Germany. Like I said in the movie, young kids today in Bosnia are more nationalists, even more nationalists like their parents or even soldiers who participated in the war. And the problem is in Bosnia that we don't have our school trips to our Dachau. We don't have kids from Banja Luka visiting Srebrenica or kids from Tuzla and Sarajevo visiting Kazani where some war crimes on the Serbs were committed. And that's, of course, if you ask me, a big mistake. So, yeah, that's some of the topics I rap about in my music. Tough stuff, I know. But, I see it as my duty to write about stuff like this and to react, to stand up for what is right, and to give back a little bit, because hip-hop music taught me a lot. Actually, my critical thinking, my activism, all that came somehow through hip-hop. And now I am in a position where I have a little power, and I try to be constructive and positive with that. I have one line that was a big inspiration for me writing this song and writing almost all of my songs. On Bosnian it goes, mi smo ti koji smo čekali. And in English it means, if we don't react, who will? Because we are the ones who we're waiting for. Thank you.
Hvala, Frankie.
Molim.
Please have a seat again, and we'll see you back for the Q&A round later. Another round of applause. Frankie.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and our second speaker is someone who believes in first-hand experience, and he has a lot of that because he has worked in many conflict zones around the world. And he has seen firsthand what happens when children are actually in conflict. He is Director of Strategy and Innovation, and he's head of the International Development Law Organization, IDLO, the branch office in The Hague. His name is Louis Gentile. Please give him a warm welcome.
It's the 12th of April, 1993, and I'm standing before a chain link fence. The chain link fence is covered with blood and human flesh. If I close my eyes, it's like I'm still there. And I've dreamt this scene many, many times since it happened. On the other side of the chain link fence are the bodies and a few of the survivors of a terrible shelling where children were playing football. It's the town of Srebrenica in eastern Bosnia. 65 children were killed ultimately, and more than 100 terribly wounded. 65 doesn't sound like a dramatic number when we hear huge numbers these days. But I can tell you, when you see 65 dead people, children in one place, it seems like the entire world, all the children of the world, piled together. I was the only UN civilian in Srebrenica at that time, working with a very small group of brave peacekeepers in impossible circumstances. The people had fled from surrounding villages. They were living, many even outside, without shelter, desperate for food, staying alive just with airdrops dropped from the sky, some eating leaves, they were so desperate. And even though it was April, it was still quite cold at night, so people were also suffering from cold, and they were getting sick. And they were surrounded by a hostile army, and they were being shelled every day. The best we could do was the next morning organize a convoy of the wounded and some of the survivors to take them to a nearby town across the front line where they could receive better medical attention and maybe save some of their lives. They arrived in a place called Tuzla, where the international media was present and took pictures of the children coming off those trucks, because they were transported on trucks, that's all we had. People were so desperate when that convoy was leaving Srebrenica, the morning of the 13th of April, they were actually throwing their children onto the trucks to get them out of there, knowing they may never see them again, but thinking maybe this is the only way I can save my child's life. Fast forward to February 1994. I'm in the town of Banja Luka, a very different context to Srebrenica. It's away from the front line, it's still in Bosnia, but the war does not feel so close, at least in terms of fighting between armed forces or shelling artillery. But something very nasty and evil is happening, because every night people are being driven from their homes. They're being attacked and persecuted because of who they are, what their name is, what their religion is. I'm, at this point, heading a small UN office. There are no UN peacekeepers in this area because they were not allowed to enter. And we're, with 3 human rights lawyers, trying to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of people who are being persecuted. A futile and hopeless task at which we failed miserably. The morning that I'm going to refer to in February 1994, we arrived at the office very early, just after sunrise. And we found standing at the door of our office a young girl of 13 and her grandfather. Her grandfather turned around, and when we saw his face, it was beaten to a pulp, so he didn't even look human anymore. It was just red mush. Scary, terrible. And first concern was, we need to take this man to the hospital. We need to get treatment for him. He refused immediately. He wanted to tell his story. Beside him, his young granddaughter of 13 was standing in a bloodied skirt. We took them into our office, and they told us their story. The night before, the granddaughter, 13-year-old girl, was raped in front of her parents. Her parents were killed before her eyes. Her grandfather beaten after witnessing the rape of both his granddaughter and his daughter. The only thing they wanted was to get out and flee from this situation. They were one very small family that we could assist to get out of Bosnia through a mechanism with the International Red Cross, Committee of the Red Cross. And through a very quick process, we got them out of Bosnia to Austria, where they had proper medical care and hopefully a much better life. But every night, hundreds of cases like this were going on that we could not even see. We would drive around in the middle of the night trying to stop attacks with unarmed, just 3 human rights lawyers. It was insane. Why am I telling you these stories 20 years later? Why is it relevant to our discussion today? I think what I want to point out to you, and this is really the tragic part of it, 20 years on, 20 years after the genocide in Rwanda, more than 20 years after the story I told you took place in Srebrenica. And of course, you know that in 1995, the worst massacre in Europe since the Second World War would also take place in the same town. But now, we see a proliferation of conflicts around the world, an intensification of conflicts in some areas that have been going on for some time. You know the places I'm talking about. You've seen them in the news. Syria, Iraq, Yemen's on the brink, Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, Gaza, South Sudan, Central African Republic. It's overwhelming. What can we do? What I can tell you is that we're no better now, 20 years later, at protecting children in conflict than we were 20 years ago. And you've seen some of the conflicts I referred to going on year after year without any ability to protect children in that situation. So what is the last resort for desperate people in conflict? Well, the only course of action that becomes rational at some point is to flee. You flee for your life. Right? So I ask then, with all of the wonderful legal frameworks we've developed over the last 20, 30, 40 years, and we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, why is it that we cannot protect children better? And what happens when people do flee? Do we welcome them and act in their best interests? Or do we build barriers, walls, fences, navies? Do we worry first and foremost about security or about the best interests of children who deserve protection? When there's a balance of interests, which interest takes precedence? And I would argue that we need to take the best interests of children, which is the core principle of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, more seriously. We need to give it precedence. Because the way we act now, not only do we fail to protect children in danger, but even when people flee, they're often pushed back, or barriers are put up so it's very difficult for them to get out of where they are. I don't think we can be very proud of that. Now that's conflict, and that's the context today of where we've come after 20 years, not too far. But what about outside of conflict? How are we doing with children's rights there? Maybe because we have a less complex situation, less politics involved, less danger in deciding whether or not to intervene to protect people. Because that's always a very difficult and complex process. If one needs to protect people in a conflict zone, how do you do that? What legal mechanisms allow you to do that? And that's a whole other topic of conversation. But outside of conflict, the basic rights of children to primary education, to healthcare, to life. And let's look at some of these statistics. Some of the statistics that prove how we're doing now. 17,000 children under 5 or more will die today of preventable illnesses and diseases. More than 6.3 million each year under 5. Not from diseases we cannot prevent, not from illnesses we cannot cure, but from diseases and illnesses we know exactly how to prevent, and it doesn't even cost us much to prevent. 17,000 children today. 150 million girls. 150 million girls. 73 million boys have been victims of rape or sexual assault. The numbers are staggering. It's unbelievable. 50 million children, primary school age, not able to go to primary school for various reasons, usually linked to poverty and deprivation. And I could go on. Tens of millions stateless when they have the right to nationality and identity under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And when I try to put this into context, I think I reach out to you and I say, it's overwhelming, it's mind-boggling. We need to actually sensitize ourselves because the numbers are so large, the problems seem so complex. We tend to throw in the towel and say, it's too big, it's too complex, what can I do as an individual? And I would say, each and every one of you can do a lot. First and foremost, take ownership. In our own homes, commit to no violence. That's already a massive step forward. Yeah. We develop our policy as an international community as if we are parents in a family. And we have 4 or 5 children. We decide to feed and clothe 4 of those children, send them to the doctor when they're ill, make sure they have proper medicine, send them to the best schools we can afford. And we decide that other child we have, because we're going to put the resources to the other 4, we'll leave that child to die. We're not going to send that child to school. We're not going to provide medicine for that child when that child is ill. We are a global community, and those children are our collective responsibility. So this is a fairly depressing picture I'm painting, and that's not my purpose in talking with you today. I actually believe that my generation has failed to live up to the best interests of children and protect those interests. But just as I believe we failed, I really believe that you will succeed to live up to these principles. You have all the tools. You have the creativity. You have the science and the medicine to make solutions for people who before were vulnerable, easily treatable and protectable. You have the finances and the wealth. Look at what was done with the Ice Bucket Challenge, for example. Recently, how much money was raised for a relatively obscure, unknown illness. Imagine what you can do in crowdfinancing an end to poverty in one particular country, or access to primary education in an entire region. With our own resources, forget about government resources. We have enough wealth. We can solve the problems. You can solve the problems. So I believe with that possibility, combined with the global mentality that a new generation has, if you see each other as one family, because we know we are, the cocoon, the bubble we live in is the whole planet. We can no longer live in isolation, and we don't. So that child that we leave out is our brother and sister, our son or daughter. And the solutions to cure these problems and to act in the best interests of children everywhere are before us and in your hands. And I'm confident you're going to use them and realize the promise that is before you. Thank you so much.
Louis Gentil, give him another warm applause. Thank you very much, Louis. And Frankie, may I ask you to join us here? If you could move a little bit, yes. So we've heard both Louis and Frankie share their stories, but now it's time for us to hear from you. So let me explain how this works. This is what we call the meeting of the minds, and maybe you've already seen there's 2 microphones, one on my left and one on my right. And just like the parliament or any other session where there's speakers, I would like to invite you to just simply walk to the mic and ask your question or make your statement, and make a line if there's more than one person, and I will give the floor to you, and we will collect a few. So if there's anyone among you who has a question or a thought that they would like to share with us or with Frankie or with Louis, then I would like to invite you. Please don't be shy. And of course, you can also do that online using the hashtag Hague Talks. And I'm counting on the support of the social media team there to feed any comments to us. Now, while you prepare or think about your questions, I'm going to ask one question to both of you. So you both experienced the war and post-war region of the Balkans. How do you think the future is looking for young people there? If they would be here, what would they be sharing with us now?
Well, we have somebody who's directly experienced with that, but maybe just from my experience and having been back to the Balkans quite a few times, even recently, look, it's a complex thing because first of all, you need to have economic opportunity for young people. The levels of unemployment for young people are very, very high. So that is already a huge challenge and problem in terms of people feeling positive about their futures. But there's also still, I think, a strong undercurrent of nationalism. I don't really believe that people have reconciled fully. And I think that's true in most of the Balkans. And that means there's still a lot of work to be done to reconcile people and bring them together.
Right. Frankie, of course, you already mentioned that nationalism in your speech. What do you think we can do to actually fight that? We have a question coming in, thank you.
Well, I totally agree with what you said before, and it's even not that hidden about when we talk about nationalism. We hear it every day in the news, in the drinking coffee, talking with friends, especially when we have like election year or something like that. Those topics come up very fast, and we don't have any real change because we still have the same politicians on power, more or less, than the guys that started the war, were there in the war and after the war. So we have some new, fresh faces and new, smart people, but they don't get they don't get a lot of votes. They don't get the space that they deserve. So it's a very, very depressing situation, and the whole story just repeats. It's every year, and we basically don't move forward. We stand in a place for 10 years and talk about stuff like nationalism or stuff like that. Nobody talks about schools, health, jobs, economics, and stuff like that. Or somebody tries, but it very quick falls down when somebody comes in and talks about nationalism and war and stuff like that.
So if I listen to you, you've given up hope on politics.
No.
You haven't?
No, I didn't.
Okay. But there's just not enough space for innovative politics.
Well, the problem is that young people are pessimists. They are not optimistic like me or some guys. Most of them try, or their plan is to move away from Bosnia. And that's the problem we have. So that's like a circle. Young people are disappointed, don't believe in new politicians, don't vote, and the new politicians don't get their vote, and it's a circle. So yeah.
Right. What do you think? I already definitely heard some pessimism in your talk. You said we also a look towards the future.
Yeah.
You said we failed the children. You said your generation failed the children.
Yeah.
But what do you think the next generation, and a lot of representatives of the next generation are with us today, could do to actually make up for that?
Well, what I think is very promising about where we are now, and there are a lot of people who think the world's never been a better place than it is today, because the horrible statistics that I shared with you are part of the picture, but there's also a trajectory of improvement in many ways. In terms of, for example, child mortality, it's halved in many regions of the world since the 1990s. But what's making me an optimist is the tools that you have available now. But what you need, I think, to do is separate yourselves from the older generation, which has made bad choices, which still thinks it makes sense to allow 17,000 children die every day. It's craziness.
So we just got a question that's actually exactly about that. Where would you start now if you were 20 years old? Arend Jan wants to know from you.
Yeah. I think the greatest promise in a way is through creative processes. I don't think it's necessarily through politics or law. I think it's the new idea. It's the crazy sense that we ourselves have the power and the resources to change the world if we get other people through social media and through communications tools that we now have available to understand the urgency of some of these things and to know that $10 or $20 or euro will actually save lives, and we can get a mass movement going to eliminate child mortality, to eliminate the fact that many, many children don't have access to education or healthcare, and empower yourselves to come up with solutions without necessarily relying on others or governments to do those things.
Frankie,
Now, of course, I
Sorry,
think... Sorry.
I have to cut you short here. Frankie, what would you do if you were 20 years old right now? What would you advise people to do to get involved?
Well, to take things in their own hands and to think with their own head, to be active in daily life and to, follow and be informed about stuff that happens and to be active in all kinds of parts in life. Is it politics? Is it activism? Stuff like that. That's what I learned.
Okay, to be active and to stay involved. I'm in view of time. I'm sorry that I have to leave it at this, but I would like to thank you both for being here with us today to share your thoughts. And let's take the optimist note with us that it is in fact in our own hands in the end. Thank you very much, Louis and Frankie.
Thank you.
Now, if you turn on the television today, or if you open a newspaper today, there's one topic that keeps coming up, especially in Europe, and that topic is radicalization. Apparently, it's a topic that the media cannot get enough of. And of course, it is a very big issue today in a world that is increasingly polarized between people who feel them and us, people who say we are right and they are wrong. In this polarized world, radicalization is a growing topic. We have with us a very good friend of mine, Imam Yassin El-Furqani, who is going to share some of his thoughts about the issues driving young people to want to join the jihad. And he will speak in Arabic and he will be translated by an interpreter. Please welcome, first we have a video and then please welcome Yassin El-Furqani. Let's have a look.
ياسين الفرقاني ولد في هولندا وتولدت في 82 وانا من عائله محافظه. الوالد ديالي فقيه حامل لكتاب الله والاجداد كذلك. دوزت في هولندا تقريبا واحد المده معينه تقريبا حوالي 8 سنوات وبعد ذلك رجعت الى المغرب دراسه وحفظا للقران ودراسه للعلوم الشرعيه. تخرجت من جامعة الأزهر وبعد ذلك بدأت في عملي، يعني كنت موظفا لدى البلدية وموظفا لدى الحكومة وبعد ذلك بدأت في عمل خاص في إطار الاستشارات. وأصبحت إماماً خطيباً للجمعة في مساجد كثيرة جداً والآن أخطب جمعة في مسجد أوتريخت. وأيضاً أصبحت ناطقاً رسمياً باسم المؤسسة الإسلامية المعترفة من طرف الحكومة الهولندية. عندما بدأت أدرس العلوم الشرعية وجدت بأن هناك فراغ كبير من الناحية الشرعية من الناحية المرجعية الشرعية إن صح التعبير عند الشباب، خصوصا أن أكثر الأئمة في هولندا لا يتحدثون باللغة الهولندية، وعندما أتحدث عن اللغة لا أتحدث عن الكلام وإنما أتحدث عن الثقافة. Heel veel broeders en zusters die vergeten de grote reservoir aan fiqh, De grote reservoir aan beschaving. De grote reservoir aan kennis die we 1400 eeuwen hebben opgebouwd bij moslims. هو دور الإمام دور فعال. هو أولا دور الإمام لابد أن يكون له علاقات قوية مع الشباب وأن يفهم واقع الشباب وأن يفهم حياتهم وأن يفهم تحدياتهم. هذه مسألة أولى. والمسألة الثانية الإمام له دور في تصحيح المفاهيم. نحن عندنا إشكالية كبيرة عند الشباب أنهم يحبون الإسلام ويريدون أن يرجعوا إلى الإسلام ولكنهم لا يفهمون الإسلام. يعني تجد شابا مثلا يشعر بأن هناك ميز عنصري في هذا البلاد، يعني وإذا كان هذا الشعور موجود وجاءت إيديولوجية متطرفة من الناحية الإسلامية فسيقع خللا كبيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام.
السلام عليكم. في الحقيقة مسرور جدا أن ألتقي معكم وأن أراكم وأن أحدثكم. مباشرة آخذكم إلى حوار كان بيني وبين أحد الشباب الذين ذهب إلى سوريا ورجع من سوريا، وأريد أن أقف على 3 نقط.
السلام عليكم. Peace be upon you. I'm Anas Bandreev, the translator. I'm happy to meet you, and I want to share you a story with you. The story that I was involved with, which is mine when I meet somebody, a young man who went to Syria.
هذا الشاب هو شاب مثلنا مثلكم، عاش هنا وترعرع هنا وبدأ يرى حوله ويرى الواقع الذي يعيش فيه. هذا الشاب حدثني عن 3 قضايا. القضية الأولى أنه قال: أنا والله عندما أنظر إلى شاشات التلفاز وأرى الأطفال يذبحون ويقتلون وأرى واقعا في سوريا تحت ضغط وتحت احتلال وتحت إنسان ديكتاتوري، يعني لا يحترم الإنسان ولا يحترم عدل الإنسان، فشعرت بمسؤولية. وقبل أن أشعر بالمسؤولية رأيت إلى واقعي وإلى العالم كله، فوجدت الساسة والسياسيين ينظرون ويتفرجون ولا يفعلون شيئا.
This young one who went to Syria spoke with him and they say, he's like you, he's a young man. And he say, when I was involved and facing and came across images and films that shows the atrocity of the regime in Syria, and I feel that the world is not evolved enough to do anything with the Syrians, with the Syrian young. I'm just asking questions. This is the first thing that he mentioned.
وبعد ذلك سألته وقلت له: ماذا عساك أنت أن تفعل؟ فقال: لا يمكن لي أن أبقى في هولندا آكل كل الملذات وأذهب في الشوارع وأتمتع بالأمن وأترك أصدقائي وإخواني في سوريا يقتلون ويذبحون. فقال لي: فذهبت إلى سوريا لأجاهد.
The argument that he said, this young man, he said, I cannot here live in peace and enjoying the fruit of life, enjoying anything which is good in this life, and I let my brothers dying every day in Syria, and that's why I decided to go there to help my brothers.
فقلت له: تجاهد؟ من أين لك هذا الفكر من الناحية الإسلامية أنك تعتبر أن الجهاد في سوريا واجب؟ فقال لي: بالله عليك، هل الإسلام يرضى أن يكون هناك أطفال ونساء يقتلون ويذبحون؟
The young man said, I'm going to jihad to Syria. And the Imam said, do you consider going to Syria is a kind of jihad? The young man answers, what shall I do? Don't you think that I have a duty as a Muslim to go there and to help my brothers? This is what I'm going to do. And he went to Syria.
وبعد ذلك قال لي: وهل ترى بأن العالم كله يرضى بالإسلام؟ إني أعيش في هولندا، ولدت هنا، أشعر بأنني لست منتميا إلى هذا البلد. أشعر أنني عندما أخرج إلى الساحة وإلى العالم عندما أخرج إلى الواقع أجد نفسي في زاوية منغلقة، لا أحد يقبلني ولا أحد يرضى بي.
The young man say, when I'm in Netherlands, I don't feel at home. I feel discriminated. I feel that the West does not want me as such. He doesn't accept me.
وبعد ذلك قال: إني وجدت الحل في أن أدافع وأن أقاوم، ولا بد أن أذهب إلى سوريا، فذهبت.
The best solution is to go there and to help my brothers, and that is why I went to Syria.
السؤال الثاني قلت له: ماذا فعلت في سوريا؟ ماذا وجدت في سوريا؟ هل رأيت في سوريا ما كنت تعتقده قبل أن تذهب إلى سوريا؟
And I put the question when he came back to Syria, and he say, okay, what did you find what you were looking for when you were in Syria?
أجابني وقال: عندما دخلت إلى سوريا رأيت أمورا لم أكن أتوقع أني أراها. يقول: أحياء بأكاملها دمرت، أطفال قتلوا، عوائل شتتت. فقال: انبهرت بما رأيته من دمار.
You say, I didn't expect what I will find. I find the ruina. I find family dramas. I find the whole neighborhoods that are destroyed.
وبعد ذلك بدأنا نتحدث عن هذه الأمور، ووصلنا إلى ما يسمى الآن بداعش، إلى ما يسمى الآن بمن يقولون أنهم يريدون تحقيق دولة إسلامية بين عارضتين.
And we spoke also about IS, and we spoke about what they called al-Khilafah, what we called Islamic State.
فقلت له: هل التقيت معهم؟ هل حدثتهم؟ ما رأيك بهم؟
Did you meet IS people? Did you speak to them? What do you think about them?
فقال لي: أنا عندما كنت هنا والآن قد رجعت إلى هولندا رأيت فعلا بأن هناك إيديولوجيات تأخذ عقول الشباب وتحاول أن تستغل الفراغ الموجود وتحاول أن تدفع بأجندتها التي في الحقيقة اعتقدت في أول الأمر أن لها الحق، ولكن الآن اكتشفت أن هذا الأمر سيؤدي إلى دمار وإلى هلاك أكثر.
I meet them and I say that the ideology of them is like they are brainwashing the youth, they are filling the gap which is existed as far as Islamic law is concerned, and they are like going on in their struggle with their own agenda, and that lead to trouble.
فبدأت أفكر تفكيرا كبيرا في هذه الكلمات التي قال لي هذا الشاب، فقلت: لي مسؤولية كبيرة تجاه هؤلاء الشباب، لي مسؤولية في محاولة تعديل فهمهم لإسلامهم الذين يحبونه، والإسلام كما أعلمه وكما أعرفه أنه يدافع عن السلام. وقضية أخرى، وهذه ختاما أريد أن أقول بأن العدل والمساواة هذه المبادئ كلها مسؤوليتكم ومسؤوليتي، وأدعوكم إلى أن نحاول أن نقيم حياة عادلة إنسانية يستطيع الكل أن يعيش فيها.
It was a long sentence, by the way. Anyway, I will try. I say, I feel as an imam a responsibility to correct him, to tell him, look, it is our responsibility as a human being, and finally, it is your responsibility as well to build a peace, to build a brotherhood, to build fraternity, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا يا ياسين. شكرا. So it's time again for a Q&A. So if you have any questions for Yassine, please join us on one of the microphones, and don't worry if you don't speak Arabic, because we do have a translator present, and well, I could also try to help out if it's too much. We already have one question from Georgina Fitzjohn, who came to us from the social media team.
Je moet werken. Ja.
And her question is, what is the role of the state in being inclusive enough so young people feel connected and are less likely to hurt their communities by turning to jihad?
نعم. لا، هناك مسؤولية يعني تجاه كل فرد من المجتمع وأيضا للدولة. أنا حدثتكم على أن الشباب يشعرون في بعض الأحيان أنهم ليسوا أهل هذه الدولة رغم أنهم ولدوا فيها وترعرعوا فيها. فأقول للساسة وللسياسيين دوركم تحقيق العدل الكامل، وهذا أمر بنيت عليه حضارتنا وبنيت عليه الديمقراطية. فإذا كان الإنسان يشعر بأنه عنصر داخل هذه الدولة كن على يقين أنه لن يزيغ إلى التطرف البتة.
He said to politicians that is their role to protect such people. You don't have to give them the feeling that they are not at home. These young people have to feel that they are at home. They have to be feeling that they are like part of this great democracy that we are building together.
Make them feel at home. Shukran. And thank you, Georgina, if you're joining us on the live stream. Thank you very much for asking that question. Keep them coming. Now, I turn to my right, and I think you just standing here as the first person at the microphone is already worthy of applause. Yes. Very brave. Thank you very much. Can you please introduce yourself?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Met Erdogan. I am a student at the Hague University. I study European Studies, and I'm 21 years old. And I'd like to start with addressing my question directly in Dutch to the Imam, and I will repeat it in English. I think then we won't need interpreter in the middle. A few weeks back, there was een paar weken geleden was er een documentaire op Nederland 3. Het ging over een jongen die Marokkaanse jongen die naar Syrië was gegaan. En hij zei één ding wat eigenlijk me heel erg opviel, en dat is dat hij zei: in Nederland kunnen we eigenlijk geen moslim zijn. Je kan niet als een echte moslim willen leven en ook nog in Nederland willen leven. Dat botst gewoon heel erg. To repeat my question, there was a documentary about a young Moroccan guy who went to Syria, and his statement was as follows: I want to be a Muslim, and I want to be a Muslim as perfect as I can be, but I can't do this in Netherlands. It's just impossible. So, what do you think about it? Wat denkt u daarover? Is het mogelijk? Is het possible?
Ja. In Nederlands antwoorden? Nou, dank voor de vraag. In principe is het inderdaad wel zo van dat jongeren in een zoektocht zetten van hoe kan ik hier in Nederland leven? Dat heeft ook deels te maken met het feit dat jongeren vaak geconfronteerd worden met discriminatie, met islamofobische uitingen, met uitingen die inderdaad illustreren dat iemand zich niet thuis kan voelen in Nederland. Daarom zeg ik ook van, om dit probleem vanuit de bodem te kunnen op te lossen, zouden we niet alleen maar naar het jihadisme moeten kijken. Kijk ook puur naar die eigen gemeenschap die een verantwoordelijkheid moet dragen. Maar we moeten met z'n allen in staat zijn om bepaalde excessen in de samenleving niet te accepteren. We zeggen nee tegen discriminatie. We zeggen nee tegen antisemitisme. We zeggen nee tegen islamofobie. En we zeggen nee tegen homofobie. En we zeggen nee om elkaar te isoleren. En we zeggen ja, we gaan met elkaar leven.
Thank you very much. Let me translate that very quickly. So this search that the documentary was about, the almost quest for personality and identity. On your quest for identity, you often encounter discrimination in the Netherlands or Islamophobia, which is a reality here, unfortunately. Then you even if you want to feel at home, it's hard to feel at home. So we should not, when we analyze this debate, not only look at jihadism, but also look at other things like, in addition to the own responsibility of the Muslim community in the Netherlands, say a very clear no to discrimination, a no to anti-Semitism, a clear no to Islamophobia, and a clear yes to solving this issue together. Shukran. We have another. Does that answer your question? Sorry, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you very much for asking your question. Now let's turn to the left. If you could please introduce yourself.
My My name is Jackson Odong. I am a student at the Institute of Social Studies, Erasmus University. Two questions. One, we live in a period where religion is highly divisive rather than actually uniting people. And this is not about Islam only, including Christianity and so forth. And I wanted to find out, in your opinion, what would you consider, because some people don't even believe in any religion now, what would you consider as the key broader principles that go beyond religion that we should actually look up to as uniting factors? And then secondly, looking at the Islamophobia that exists and deep perceptions that are entrenched now in the young generation. When we look up on TV, we see Islam, they are the terrorists. They're the bad guys. They're the ones doing all the bad things. There's nothing good actually represented in the media about Islam. And I want to find out what needs to change in today's media and how can these perceptions be reversed.
Thank you. Ik beloof voor de volgende keer spreek ik Engels met u.
Sorry.
I promise next time I will speak English with you.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Zal ik het in het Nederlands doen? Ja? Kijk, twee belangrijke vragen. Vraag nummer 1, hoe ga je om met andersdenkenden? Zo heb ik hem even vertaald gekregen.
Question number 1 is, how do we deal with people with different opinions?
En vraag nummer 2, hoe ga je om met de beeldvorming? Want dat is ook een vraag.
And question number 2 is, how do you deal with the image that people build around you?
Als het gaat, hoe ga je om met verschillen, daar zie ik een grote verantwoordelijkheid voor elke samenleving om dat te agenderen. Dat betekent...
dealing with differences should be your society's responsibility to put that on the agenda, which means...
Dat betekent heel simpel, als ik in een moskee sta en ik spreek en ik preek, u zag net, bijna de honderden mensen die mij naar luisteren, dat wij een competentie moeten gaan aanscherpen. Hoe zijn wij in staat om andersdenkenden, mensen die anders zijn, om die ook een plek te kunnen geven in je eigen denkproces.
So that means that you just saw me preaching there on screen. That means that when I'm standing there in front of hundreds of people preaching, we should think about the responsibility that we have to actually include people that may have different ideas than we do.
En het mooiste zou zijn is als je in staat bent om dat proces op gang te krijgen bij jezelf. En je opereert vanuit een belangrijke uitgangspunt, dat is liefde voor iedereen hebben.
And the best thing would be that if you are aware of that process yourself, that you start actually operating from one of the most beautiful foundations there are to life's philosophy, and that is to love the other.
En als ik naar de zaal kijk, dan denk ik dat u dat echt kan.
And I think if I look at you, that you have that capacity.
Tweede vraag, ga gelijk door over de beeldvorming.
So the second question about the image.
Beeldvorming is een grote issue in de wereld.
Image is a big issue in the world.
En dat probleem kan je met één oplossing, denk ik, oplossen.
And there's only one solution for problems of that scale, I think.
Dat is dat je als individu, maakt niet uit welke positie je hebt, een groot gehalte van integriteit moet hebben.
And that is, as an individual, you need a high degree of integrity.
Dus journalisten, wees integer.
So all the journalists should really bear in mind.
En natuurlijk moeten wij in staat zijn in de samenleving om de prachtige mooie voorbeelden te laten zien. Daar zal een journalist misschien niet in geïnteresseerd zijn, maar u heeft de social media om dat te laten zien.
We should, as a society, make it our task to also show good examples, which may be less interesting for journalists, but that's why we have social media, so we can actually show
Daarom
good
gaat
examples.
u de wereld veranderen.
And that's why you will change the world. Yes?
Is it working?
I think it is.
Okay.
Could you please introduce yourself first?
Will do. My name is Gunnar Alvika. I'm part of European Studies course in the Hague University. My question is actually based on the part of the speech when you mentioned about that it's in human nature to try to do the best. The question is that while there is a difference in opinion, don't you think there will be always the risk of further discrimination to occur? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So is there not always the risk of further discrimination? While you keep translating, please continue. I will ask for the second and last question already, I'm afraid, in view of time. Please.
All right, my name is Bart, and I am a student of international relations at Webster University. Go Gorlocks, awesome.
What's that?
Oh,
Oh, that's an inside joke.
it's very peaceful.
It's very peaceful. Yes. Okay, good. That's a relief.
So, my question is, you as an individual religious leader in a community, it's no secret that the documents of basically the three big revealed religions in the world are pretty violent when you read them. As that religious leader, when you have these young persons in the community, and they come to you and ask questions about if I am supposed to follow this religion properly, and these documents say I'm supposed to act another way, how do you deal with that challenge and try to make them understand that the document doesn't need to be followed literally?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So we have two questions. We have the first one about discrimination, and will that not actually always be there? And the second question by the gentleman over here about the violence, the integral part of violence as he sees it as part of the three holy books. And we have a social media. That's then the last question. Yes.
Ik pak gelijk de tweede, omdat ik de eerste nog niet goed heb begrepen. Misschien kan je hem even uitleggen.
Is goed. So we start with the second question.
Ja. U maakt een opmerking wat misschien terecht kan zijn en hopelijk in mijn opinie niet terecht is.
So the point you made might be correct in your point of view, but I beg to differ.
Natuurlijk hebben we in de wereld mensen die één ding roepen.
Of course, there's people who shout things.
En dat is die godsdiensten, geloof alleen maar ellende.
Religion equals misery and well, violence.
En vooral mensen die er heel slim en goed in zijn om religie te gebruiken voor politieke agenda's.
And there's a lot of people who are very skilled in using religion for political agendas.
Maar ik geef u één ding mee.
But I want to tell you one thing.
Ik opereer vanuit de islam en ik zeg we hebben 1,5 miljard moslims in de wereld.
I operate from Islam and I say we have 1.5. How many miljard?
Ik denk 1,5 miljard.
Billion Muslims in the world.
En als u kijkt naar al die moslims, dames en heren, kan ik u één ding meegeven. Dat de grote meerderheid gelukkig geïnspireerd wordt vanuit de islam om vrede te stichten.
And I can tell you one thing, that thankfully the big majority of those 1.5 billion Muslims are inspired by Islam to live a peaceful life.
De grote geloof die eigenlijk last heeft van ISIS, dat zijn wij als moslims.
And the biggest victim in terms of religions of ISIS is actually Islam itself.
En ik ga een kritische noot maken naar de moslims zelf.
And I will be critical towards Muslims themselves.
Om te zeggen, je moet in staat zijn om je islam te inspireren en uit te stralen waarin je mensen kan verbinden aan je. En hou eens een keer op met al die religieuze onderbouwingen die ver staan van de samenleving. En daarom roep ik ook op tot vernieuwing in de kijk vanuit de islam naar de samenleving.
I call on Muslims to actually be more innovative in the way they deal with society, instead of talk about religious concepts that they actually might have misunderstood.
Dat was hem.
Shukran. Thank you. Very briefly, can I ask you to introduce the question that came online? Very briefly, because I'm being cued that we need to round off.
The question is, what is the role of women in Islam societies presenting on reducing the radicalization of young people?
The role of women, and then there's still your question as well. I haven't forgotten.
Ik pak gelijk deze even op, rol van de vrouw. En dan moet ik even tussen haakjes aangeven dat de islam eigenlijk vaak beschuldigd wordt dat de vrouw in mindere mate een positie heeft. Terwijl ik je één ding kan zeggen, mijn vader is imam en hij heeft thuis echt niks te vertellen.
So often there's a misconception about women and that they have no power at all in Islam. Well, I can tell you one thing. I'm from a family where my father is an imam and he has no power at all
en als mijn vader niks te vertellen heeft, dan begrijpt u ook dat ik bijna helemaal niks te vertellen heb.
And if my father has nothing to say in the house, then you understand that I have virtually nothing to say at
Wat ik wil
house.
zeggen, de islam die kan gezond een ontwikkeling meemaken als er een duidelijke inspiratie, leiderschap is vanuit de twee componenten en dat is de vrouw en de man.
Islam can only develop in an inspired way if there's a balance between the two crucial components, being a woman and a man.
Als je teruggaat naar de theologische reservoir die we hebben, dan zie je dat vrouwen in het theologische reservoir hun stempel theologisch gezien goed hebben kunnen drukken. En dat hoop ik dat dat in de komende tijd ook wereldwijd op leidersniveau ook gerealiseerd zou kunnen worden.
So there's a pool, a reservoir of theological basis where women have actually put their stamp clearly, and he hopes, I hope, if I translate literally, I should say I hope, that there will be in the future more opportunity for women to keep putting their stamp.
En uiteraard is er een hele kritische proces gaande als het gaat om de rol van de vrouw, ook in de islamitische wereld. Dat proces moet kritisch gevolgd worden en ik hoop dat we in staat zijn om dat proces goed te kunnen beëindigen.
And we should follow that process critically, and Yassine hopes, I hope, he says, that the process will continue positively. Now, de allerlaatste vraag, the last question, that's your question, and if I paraphrase it please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said, isn't discrimination of all times? Is that what you said? Can you please go to the microphone so people can hear you? And that's then the very, very last question. Yes.
No, the question was because he expressed that we should take in our hands to try and do our best as humans.
Yes.
But how can you convince as in one individual around so many other people who have a different opinion? So the question was like, while there's a difference in opinion, wouldn't there always be that risk of discrimination? And you, as one individual, can't change someone's mind just because you believe in that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Just while the translation is going on, the word optimism and pessimism kind of keeps coming back. So I just want a quick raise of hands. Who considers himself an optimist here in this room? See, overwhelming majority. You are an optimist too. Oh, that's a relief.
Kan je misschien nog even helpen in het verduidelijken van de vraag?
Nou, wat zij dus, I'm sorry, I'm going to do this in Dutch. Wat zij wil weten is, als individu ben je toch vaak in de minderheid, want er zijn heel veel mensen die er anders over denken dan jij. Wat kan je dan toch als individu doen om discriminatie tegen te gaan, waar jij eigenlijk toe opriep?
Ja, nee, zeker. Prachtige mooie vraag, dankjewel voor deze vraag. Nou, ik zal u één ding zeggen, een verandering kan bij een individu beginnen.
Change definitely can start.
En als u kijkt naar onze filosofen, historici en mensen die de verandering op gang hebben gebracht, waren één. En daarom denk ik dat wij op het gebied van discriminatie niet alleen als individu zijn, maar ik denk als u begint, dan kunt u wereldwijd heel veel steun krijgen. Want laat ik eerlijk zeggen, een beschaving kan onderuit gaan op het moment dat er discriminatie plaatsvindt of het meten met twee maten.
Mm-hmm. So there have been many examples in the past where actually change was initiated by individuals, so we should not give up that hope. And he says, I'd like to turn it around. Societies can actually collapse if we don't manage a way to fight discrimination.
Dank u wel.
On that note, let me say shukran jazilan, Yassine.
Dank u wel.
Shukran jazilan. Thank you very much. Give them a warm applause. Thank you. Yeah, now it's time to introduce our next speaker, who has actually just got back from a Syrian refugee camp, where he uses dance and music to help fight violence. Can we please get a warm welcome for Tariq Al-Salah?
jogar capoeira, todos sabem como é. Joga homem e menino, ora meu Deus, e também joga mulher. Mestre Patria falou, e mestre Bimba confirmou. Todos podem aprender, ora meu Deus, general também notou. Sou mulher, eu sou Maria, sou mulher, eu sou Maria. Capoeira de valor, 12 homens me chamam, ora meu Deus, é melhor saber quem sou.
A few days ago, I was driving into Azraq refugee camp, built for over 130,000 refugees in the middle of the desert in Jordan. A barbed wire fence cuts into the sand. Thousands of shelters, as far as the eye can see, back to back. I'm stopped at the fence. The soldier asked to see my security clearance. There are many young men hanging around, kicking up the desert sand. Syrian refugees aren't allowed to work in Jordan, and there's nothing to do. I don't really see any girls after about the age of 11, 12. They aren't allowed of their shelters. Many marry before the age of 15. So how do I end up here? A German guy in a desert refugee camp. In 2007, I was running a successful gym, but I was overworked. My girlfriend just left me. The weather was awful. I really needed a meaningful change. I'm actually half Syrian, and my Arab roots brought me back to the Middle East. So I was practicing my capoeira moves on the streets of Damascus, singing, playing the instruments. Local kids joined me. They brought their friends, they brought their friends, some brought their parents. So I decided to set up classes for them. And from these early beginnings, I set up classes in youth prisons, programs with Iraqi and Palestinian refugees, in safe houses, reaching out to thousands of students every year. But it's not a surprise that capoeira speaks to the young people I work with today. Capoeira is not just about flips and kicks. In capoeira, there are no winners and there are no losers. Everybody can join regardless of age and gender. It was born out of slavery in Brazil in the 16th century. It was a way of keeping the spirit free. Even the body was confined. And that powerful history inspires people and opening minds to new cultures today, creating a sense of equality and tolerance and dignity. One of my first projects was with Iraqi refugees in a playground in a UN school. We had around 30 boys, and the girls I had to train separately indoor. It was a bit conservative there. Everything was going fine until suddenly it started to rain heavily, stones and rocks. So we had to run for it. I asked the student what was going on, and they said, "Oh, it's the Syrian kids, they're stupid, they're dirty." And I asked the teachers, and they told me exactly the same story. Of course, I asked if it's okay if the Syrian kids can join the Iraqis, and the teachers were just shaking their hands. They will never play together, they hate each other. The UN school was built in a very poor area of Damascus. Of course, the Syrian kids were jealous of the new Iraqis. Their new school, their new activities. But by the second week, we actually managed to get 3 Syrian kids to join the class. They just played the music while the Iraqis were practicing the movements. The girls came for the last 5 minutes of the class for the music. This time, no stones. The following week, the Syrian kids have brought their friends. They still don't want to play with one another, but capoeira doesn't work like that. Everyone has a partner, you shake your hands, you introduce yourself, and keep practicing the movements. You keep swapping the partner until you end up playing with everyone. And by the 4th week, the Syrian and the Iraqi kids were practicing together even before the class started. The teachers, they couldn't believe their eyes. They were so amazed. But is it such a surprise when using sport and music and play together? For refugee children and their families, one of the first things to be lost is a sense of dignity. And it is that loss of self-worth and control over one's own life which makes people so vulnerable to anger and frustration, mental illness, and to choices that can lead to violence and extremism. Having a safe way to express themselves, to feel a sense of agency and self-worth, is essential for rebuilding broken communities and broken people. Let's go back to Azraq refugee camp. I saw Ahmed there last week. He plays capoeira with us. Ahmed fled Aleppo after his house was bombed and destroyed. His 3 sisters and mother traveled together with other desperate Syrians for over 3 months, running out of food and water and losing all their money to bribes. 2 men in the same truck as Ahmed got shot and killed. As Ahmed finally made it to the border, a soldier stopped him, beating him to the ground, crushing his head into the sand with a boot and breaking his nose. Ahmed is 16 years old. Kids like him, they desperately need positive outlets to deal with their violent experiences. My vision is to bring together the capoeira community and its fans to support as many projects like this as possible and to reach out to people like Ahmed. Peace, when it finally comes to the Middle East, comes to a generation with a little left to lose and normalized to violence. It is through the safe expressions of their emotions, building new relationships that are based on trust and the joy of playing with friends, that the trauma created by the violence of what they have been through can begin to heal. There are other choices. And it begins first with having freedom of mind. Can I have that? So I think we have another 4 minutes, more or less. So I thought we play a little song because it's so difficult to explain what capoeira is in words. So let's sing a song if you're up for that. There's a song called Tem Dende. Tem means I have in Portuguese, and Dende is a palm nut oil. Yeah, it is in Brazil. Lots of people are using for cooking. So it gives the food a really nice flavor and spice. And you sing this song, Tem Dende, when the play is very nice. If somebody shows participation, spice up the game a little bit. So let's try that. Yeah. So the song is quite easy. It's a call and response song. Yeah. So I sing Tem Dende, and let's try. Okay. So I sing, oh, Tem Dende, oh, Pandero, Tem Dende. And everybody sings, oh, Tem Dende, oh, Capoeira, Tem Dende. Tem Dende, oh, Peace Palace, Tem Dende. A little bit louder, Tem Dende, oh, Capoeira, Tem Dende. I don't need this. Let's try with clapping. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Hey, one. So can I get 2 people come here to the stage? I will show a very, very simple exercise. Oh, sorry. I will show. Come over, yeah. Come. I will show very, really simple exercise. Thank you. So, someone else? Yalla. Okay. So watch first, then we try to do the same with our partner afterwards. Okay. So first thing is, like I said, you introduce yourself. Shake hands. What's your name? Tara. Tarek. Hi. And can you hold this, please? Okay. So the ground step in capoeira is quite simple. It's like called jinga, but in the middle of the jinga, there's always this in the middle, like called cadeira, which means chair. Yeah. So when we're trying, come here. We're trying to be here very stable and trying the other one to get out of balance, so you don't move the feet. Okay. So you try to push me and I push you. Yeah. Okay. So. You know what we're doing now? So you grab your partner, left or right. Better if you play with somebody you don't know. Yeah, and you shake hands, you introduce yourself. You do it here. And we're also trying to sing at the same time, okay? Okay, let's get up and try that. Yeah. Thank you. This was nice, great. So children love that because they always want to. Yeah, so let's just go.
Yes, my microphone is working. Give him another round of applause. Tarek. Yes. Now, we actually had been expecting to be able to hear from another Syrian, Rami Jarrah. I don't know if we have his picture. I think we do. Yeah, that's Rami. I met him last year. No, actually 2 years ago in Utrecht. Rami is a journalist, a citizen journalist, who tries to make his contribution to the conflict in Syria by not picking up arms, but picking up a camera. And picking up a microphone and interviewing people and making sure that at least some of the news that comes from Syria is actually independent and not colored by a political view. And we had been hoping to have him here on Skype, but unfortunately he is stuck at the moment inside Syria trying to avoid troop movements of ISIS, and where he is right now, there's no internet, it's not safe, and there's no Skype. I'm very sorry, but our last communication with Rami was that we told him to stay safe, and one of our partner organizations, RNW, is working closely with Rami's organization Radio Anna, which means in Arabic Radio Me, working very closely to support that freedom of expression, which is so important right now in the conflict that Syria is in. So let's just think of Rami and pray that he's safe. Now, you are here with us, Tarek. You just got back. Where were you exactly?
I was in Azraq refugee camp, which is north of Jordan, really close to the Syrian border.
Now, you're back here now. What happens now when you're back, when you're gone? Does the work you do continue?
Yes. So what we're doing as an organization, we train local trainers to become trainers. Yeah, we are planting seeds, building instruments with them, and so that they can carry on with us not being there. And we usually have capoeira advanced trainers or capoeira masters who are going to visit the programs, also training up local capoeira groups so that they can carry on. So at the moment they still carry on, even we train in Syria as well, despite the war, which is quite amazing, which is completely run by locals. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite amazing. Is there anybody who has a question at this point to Tarek? Yes, please, if you could stand up and go to the microphone. And you too, you can use that microphone. Then we will take your questions. Yes, please.
My name is Marianne, and I understood you are half Syrian, and I was very interested, what is your opinion about what is the situation at the moment and what you hope that will happen and what we can do?
Wow, okay. And, should we answer this first?
Yes, let's.
Does it work? Okay.
It does.
It's a really, really difficult question to answer. I mean, at the end of the day, right now, it's getting from bad to worse. And I actually raised my hand over there when you asked, Imam asked, you asked if I'm a positive. Personally, I am actually. But in Syria, I think what happened is we see just a snapshot of what's going on, and we don't really see the whole film, because we had a French Revolution. It takes 400 years, and we're still not there. Yeah, in the first world countries. In Syria, I think, unfortunately, every country has to go through a phase as well, where there's lots of struggling, and I don't see any hope there for quite a bit, actually. Unfortunately, yeah.
Thank you. Let's turn to the left, and if you could please introduce yourself.
I'm Chris Rapello. I go to the International School of The Hague. My question is, do children does this actually help them with past experiences? Does learning capoeira and dancing actually help them and make them feel safer in the situation they're in right now?
Oh yeah, definitely it does. For example, the story I just told Ahmed, he was so angry when the soldier broke his nose and struggling, and he wants to go back to Syria and wanting to fight. First thing was hit head in the mind, and he's walking on his hands, playing the music, and he wants to be a teacher. So you see those little stories, of course, where you change people, but as well, it's like, unfortunately, because when you work in this charity and UN sector, there's always like something what's called monitoring evaluation. So you need to always come up with evidence. Is there actually change? Are there indicators? There's a framework and so forth, which is really technical. But so you need to show why it works. And like stories like this, for example, it just tells so much more than this indicator. We have met that and this and that. Yeah. So yeah, it does. It helps a lot of people, definitely. Building new relationships with friends and so forth there.
Thank you for asking your question. We just had a question from Georgiana from the social media team, and she said, do you think that the progress made by the children in Syria and Iraq through capoeira could be reverted by the dislike of their family or those around them? Interesting question.
It's an interesting question, but I mean, Arabs love music. Yeah, so if you play music, sometimes you end up in debke, which is the Arabic dance. You grab the other and then you start dancing. It's the same rhythm. People just love music wherever you go. So we work in really one of the most conservative area in the Arab world, and we never actually somebody came and said, you know, what you do is rubbish or haram, which means like it's forbidden, it's not appropriate. I mean, the Arabs, they like music and the play, and parents also coming. So often you have a group, you know, for example, if you're too many people, I would give you guys instruments, you do the movements, and after 5 minutes everybody's tired, so you swap, and you do the music, and you do the movements, and you can really combine this very well with capoeira, with having not a lot of space. We sing in Arabic as well. I never had problems with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see you also have a question. Okay, yes, that's then the very last question, because I've already received the signal. Oh, it's a bit, you can pull it down. Just pull it down. Yes, like that.
Okay. Hi, I'm Emily Henry. I'm also a student at the University of Webster in Leiden. I wondered, you're dealing with a lot of children that have been through traumatic situations that may be very difficult for adults and may have made them grow up very quickly. But I hear you use the word play a lot. And is that difficult for some of the children to play? Is it difficult for them to kind of open themselves up to the idea of being children again?
Yeah, sometimes yes. I mean, lot of children we train with, it's called like fight mode. So they are under permanent stress, yeah, and they don't have often they don't have a concentration span. For example, playing a simple rhythm like clapping 3 times is really difficult sometimes. It takes time, but I feel some of them they're more movements, yeah, like the game, like the play. Some of them they like the music, and this also gives them confidence as well to try the other thing, yeah. And it's the same if we are playing together. Capoeira, you can say play, you can say what you want because it's not really, whatever capoeira is not really clear. It depends what you make out of it. But as soon we're playing together for a bit, you start knowing each other, you don't feel like I look clumsy anymore or something. You just are friends, you just sing. And this is the thing where I think, which is very strong in capoeira, especially what I said, you don't have a winner, you don't have a loser. You look in your eyes all the time when you play and making the moves, you're laughing. Yeah? The goal of the game is just to play a beautiful game. If we play now capoeira and I do my flips, it's not a nice game. We play together, yeah. And I think this is where children or youth or even parents, they are starting to build trust and trusting each other. I mean, if I hit you in capoeira, it's my fault. It still hurts, but yeah. But that's the philosophy of capoeira. So I think it's very powerful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much for being with us today, Tarek, and for bringing a smile on our face. Thank you very much for the important work you do. Keep doing it. Thank you. Give him another applause, Tarek. Thank you. Now, Tarek already mentioned the word philosophy, and that is exactly the key word for our next speaker, Rob Zwijnenberg. He is a philosopher with a very special take on the bigger questions of life. Let's find out. There you go. Give him the floor, Rob Zwijnenberg.
Thank you. Well, you probably all know that we are living in the age of the golden age of biotechnology. And biotechnology involves the manipulation of living beings with techniques such as genetic modification, tissue engineering, and cloning. And it is a golden age because biotechnology promises us a golden future. We all become better humans and we have a better golden future. Now, this is particularly true of what is called human enhancement. Human enhancement is to radically increase with biotechnological means the capacities, the mental capacities, the physical capacities of humans beyond the species norm. Now, as you can imagine, human enhancement generates all kinds of issues, questions, problems, and these become most evident if we look at how human enhancement, how biotechnology impacts on the right of children, especially on the right of a child to be as he or she is born with his own mental and physical capacities. Because biotechnology, human enhancement, promises us most of all a golden future with better children, far better children than we have now, with techniques as genetic screening, prenatal genetic screening, the modification of embryos, for desired threads or the selection of embryos for desired threads. And we are now able to modify the behavior of children with biotechnological means. Now, all these techniques kind of attack our traditional notion of childhood. It is also an attack on the human context of rearing children. So we have to reconsider these notions in the face of biotechnology. For instance, in Denmark, there are hardly any children born anymore with a Down's syndrome. That is because of prenatal genetic screening and, of course, with the social pressure that goes with that. Does that mean that a child with a Down's syndrome is not really human? Yeah? So what are the limits that we wish to impose on human enhancement? What are the limits that we wish to impose on genetic screening? Do we think that the limit is a child with red hair or a child with blue eyes? Do we want to select on sex, which we already can, and why is that allowed? Or do we want to select on a color of skin? So my point is that human enhancement poses the question to us, what does it mean to be human? We have to have some understanding of what it does to mean human to come to conclude on the boundaries that of human enhancement. Now, this question is not only important in relation to biotechnology, but it's also important in relation to human rights. The concept of human dignity is at the basis of our human rights. As you can see in the EU and the UN charters of human rights, and also in the UN Convention Against Cloning, human dignity is the most important argument. But how can we decide upon what human dignity is if we have no real understanding of what it is to be human? So I think, and of course I understand the hesitation to come to a more or less fixed definition of the concept of human, of what it means to be human, because it seems that almost every definition in past and in present always automatically implied the exclusions of groups of people as not really human. And then we could deny them the basic rights of being human, the basic human rights. But I still think that we need to reconsider this question of what does it mean to be human. We have a kind of shared responsibility to come to a more inclusive understanding of being human, not only to face the challenges of biotechnology, but also to face the challenges of human rights. Now, I do think that because it's such an urgent problem, we need all the cultural resources at our disposal to come to some sort of understanding. And I think that art should be one of these resources that we have to turn to in order to come to some better understanding of what it means to be human. Art, of course, cannot give us any definite answer. Art can only unsettle us, can make us feel ambiguous, can disturb our thoughts. But art can also open up a new space in which other different perspectives can appear. Now, this is an artwork from the Australian sculptor Patricia Piccinini, and she makes sculptures in which humans and non-humans try to enter in a relationship or enter into a relationship. But when we are looking at these sculptures, it gives us anyway, gives me a kind of ambiguous feeling. What are we seeing here? Is this an utopian future, or is this a dystopian future that she displays here? When we look at the monsters, we kind of recognize that they have anthropomorphic features, and we also seem to recognize their emotions. And when we have a good look at the children, we also see that there is something weird about these children too. So probably we are looking at the monsters that we have created with biotechnology. And the artwork asks from us to enter into a relationship, to reconsider our attitude, our ethical attitude and responsibilities towards entities, human entities, non-human entities that we somehow created but that are different from us. She asked us, Patricia Piccinini's, the sculptor, to reconsider our notion of what it means to be a child, of how a child enters into a relation with this non-human. She disturbs our ideas about what it means to be a child and what it means to be human. She asks us how far our ideas of notions of being human are extended over other living animals, other living entities. Now, as I said, I think that biotechnology kind of forces us to reconsider what it is to be human. Biotechnology makes evident that we lack a good, inclusive understanding of what it means to be human. And I think it's such an important question that we need as many as different voices to answer that question. Now, art, I think, should be one of these voices, because art is a voice very different from law or from philosophy, because art addresses our senses, art addresses the imagination, art gives you a bodily experience, an embodied experience of what is happening here. Yeah? These are sculptures. You have to walk around it. You want to touch it, and at the same time, it's a kind of repulsive. So my point is that if we seek for a better and more inclusive understanding of what it means to be human, we need art as one of these necessary voices in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. And for those of you who actually have questions for Rob about his work or the fascinating works of art that you just saw, you can actually, during the break, you can go visit Rob at the exhibition of some of the pictures you may have seen while you entered the space. And Rob will be there to answer all your questions. So, and for those of you that have been asking questions online, maybe to Rob or maybe to some of our other guests, and maybe due to time pressure, I was unable to actually give them to our guests, please visit our site, haguetalks.com, because the debate actually continues online, and we will try our best to ask all the speakers to answer your questions online. So please keep asking them and keep tweeting at using the hashtag Hague Talks. Now, besides the pictures that Rob just showed, there's another exhibition that you could go enjoy during the break, and that's an exhibition of cartoons about peace and justice. Those cartoons are actually part of a global competition to raise awareness about the importance of international justice. And the winning cartoon is actually on the back of your program booklet. You might have seen it already. Now, before you can all go on your well-deserved break, there are two more motivations that you sent in that I would like to share with you. The first is from Shewit Gabriwat. Are you here, Shewit? maybe, maybe not. Shewit wrote that she has a, or he has a deep interest, I think she has a deep interest in issues related with conflict, human rights, and gender. That is because in Ethiopia there are grave human rights violations, ethnic and religious conflicts, and serious gender equality. So in order to grasp the maximum knowledge and exposure, Shewit would like to be here today. And then another one is from Barat Nataraj. Are you here, Barat? Yes, good to have you here. And Barat wrote that conflicts happen everywhere. Some practical conflicts in real life are actually not considered as conflicts. And most of the conflicts, either between individuals or states or global, can be solved by making people understand that they have to be satisfied. So what the world needs is not peace, but lots of satisfied individuals. I thought that was a very refreshing perspective from you there. And because we thought your approach was so refreshing, and also some of the others that I just read, I would like to ask Wouter Jan Leijs and Camelia Khalil and Shewit Gebrhiwot and you, Barat, if you can go to that camera right in front of me during the break, and then we would like to record a small interview with you, if that's okay with you. Now it's time for me to finally announce the short break, 20 minutes, for you to enjoy some coffee and tea, which will be waiting for you outside, or go powder your nose, which you can do downstairs, and enjoy the exhibitions. And I'm looking forward to seeing you back here after 20 minutes. Enjoy your break.